The moving truck pulled away, leaving a trail of dust that shimmered in the late afternoon sun. Sarah Thompson stood on the cracked front porch of their new home, or what was supposed to become their new home, and tried to ignore the uneasy chill that ran down her spine. The house loomed before her like something out of an old photograph, a towering Victorian relic with fading white paint, ivy crawling up its sides, and windows that reflected nothing but gray. A weathered sold sign tilted crookedly in the overgrown yard. Somewhere in the distance, a crow cawed, its voice echoing through the still, heavy air. "Mom, can I pick my room?" Emily's voice broke through the silence. The 12-year-old clutched her sketchbook tightly to her chest, her dark hair blowing across her face. "Sure, honey," Sarah said, forcing a smile. "Any room you like." Behind them, Mike was unloading boxes from their SUV. His sleeves were rolled up, his practical nature on full display. "I still can't believe we got this place for half the price," he said. "Guess people really are scared of a little history, huh?" Ben, their 8-year-old, peeked out from behind Sarah's leg. "Why is it so cold, Mom? It's summer." Sarah hesitated. The air did feel colder near the house, though the sun still burned high in the sky. "Old houses hold temperature differently," she said softly, brushing his hair back. "Come on, let's go see inside." Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and old wallpaper. The floors groaned beneath their feet, each step echoing through long, empty halls. Sunlight streamed weakly through stained glass windows, scattering fragments of color onto faded floral wallpaper. The living room was vast but shadowy, dominated by a marble fireplace and a tall mirror framed in blackened wood. Sarah caught her reflection, pale, tired eyes, the faint tremor in her smile, and quickly looked away. "This could be cozy," Mike said, setting down a box labeled kitchen. "With some paint, maybe new lighting. You know, fresh start." Sarah nodded. "That's the idea." She wanted this to work, not just for herself, but for the kids. After the divorce, everything had unraveled so fast. The move to this quiet Massachusetts town was supposed to be their reset button. No city noise, no reminders of what went wrong. Just space to breathe. "Mom," Emily called from upstairs. "Come see my room." Sarah followed the creaky staircase up to the second floor. Emily was standing in a small bedroom at the end of the hall. Light spilled in through tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing lazily in the air. "I like it," Emily said, smiling faintly. "It's peaceful." Sarah glanced around. The wallpaper peeled at the corners, revealing faint marks underneath, scratches, maybe. She decided not to mention them. Meanwhile, Ben was exploring across the hall. "Mine's bigger," he shouted, running in circles. "And look, there's a door in the wall." Sarah walked over. Indeed, there was a small door barely 3 feet tall, painted the same color as the wall. A storage crawl space, maybe. "Don't go in there, okay? It's probably full of dust." Ben nodded reluctantly. Downstairs, Mike called out, "You guys should see what I found in the attic." When they climbed up, he was standing beside a trunk covered in cobwebs. Inside lay an assortment of objects, a cracked porcelain doll, a silver hairbrush, and a faded photograph of a family. "Look at this," Mike said, handing Sarah the photo. It showed a woman in a long Victorian dress, standing stiffly beside a man and 2 small children. None of them smiled. On the back, written in elegant cursive, "The Hawthorns, 1890. Emily frowned. "They look sad." "Probably just how people looked in old photos," Mike said dismissively. "No one smiled back then." Sarah tucked the picture back into the trunk, but as she did, she thought she heard something faint, a whisper, soft and low, like the murmur of someone praying behind a wall. She froze. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Mike asked. "Nothing. Must have been the wind." But the attic window was closed. That night, after unpacking what felt like 1,000 boxes, the family sat in the living room, eating pizza off paper plates. The fireplace crackled softly, though Sarah couldn't remember lighting it. "It's not bad," Mike said between bites. "Spooky, yeah, but in a charming way." Emily chuckled. "Like haunted chick." Ben didn't laugh. He was staring at the wall beside the fireplace, his eyes wide. "Buddy?" Mike asked. "You okay?" Ben pointed. "It's whispering." Sarah exchanged a look with Mike. "What's whispering?" "The wall," Ben said simply. It said, "Don't go." The room fell silent, except for the crackle of fire. Mike forced a laugh. "Walls don't talk, champ. Probably the wind in the vents." Ben didn't answer. He just leaned closer to Sarah and whispered, "It wasn't the wind." Later that night, When everyone had gone to bed, Sarah lay awake listening. The old house creaked and sighed as if settling into its new occupants. Somewhere down the hall, a door clicked shut by itself. She told herself it was nothing, just the quirks of an old home. But her dreams said otherwise. In them, she stood in a long corridor, walls closing in around her. A woman in a black Victorian gown appeared at the end of the hallway, her face hidden by a lace veil. She was crying softly, a mournful, endless sound. When Sarah tried to speak, the woman lifted her head. Her eyes were hollow. Her mouth moved soundlessly, forming words Sarah couldn't hear. And then she was awake, heart pounding, breath ragged. The clock read 2:57 a.m. Downstairs, she heard it, 3 slow knocks on the front door. Mike stirred beside her. "Who the hell?" He slipped out of bed, grabbing a flashlight. Sarah followed quietly, her pulse thudding in her ears. The house was silent again when they reached the bottom of the stairs. Mike opened the door. Nothing. The front porch was empty. Only the cold wind moved through the grass. But as he closed the door, Sarah noticed something new. A deep scratch on the wall beside it, long and jagged, as if carved by nails. "Must have been there before," Mike muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Sarah didn't answer. She couldn't stop staring at the mark. It looked fresh. When she finally returned to bed, she lay in the dark listening, not to the creaks or the wind this time, but to something else. A faint, rhythmic whisper coming from behind the wall. It was too quiet to make out, but somehow she knew the voice was saying her name. A week had passed since the Thompsons moved into the Hawthorne house. The first few nights were uneventful, aside from the creaks and sighs of the old building. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to change. The house listened, and at night, it whispered back. Mike had settled into his new workspace in the basement, a narrow, low-ceilinged room lined with stone walls that always felt damp to the touch. His desk lamp was the only light source, throwing long, flickering shadows across the concrete floor. "Wi-Fi's crap down here," he muttered, tapping the router. The screen of his laptop glitched for a second. Static lines, a flash of a woman's silhouette, then nothing. He frowned. Must be the signal. Upstairs, Sarah was adjusting to her online classes. The peace and quiet she had hoped for came with an odd weight, as if the air in every room pressed against her chest. Sometimes, when she turned off her camera after a lesson, she swore she could still hear breathing on the other end of the call. Emily spent her afternoons sketching by her window. The girl had a natural talent for capturing details, light, texture, shadow, and lately her drawings had become darker, stranger. One morning, Sarah walked in and froze. Emily's latest piece showed the outline of their new house, but through the windows, faint faces were staring back. "Honey," Sarah said carefully, "these people in your picture, who are they?" Emily didn't look up from her sketchbook. "I don't know, I just draw what I hear." "What you hear?" Emily finally met her mother's gaze. "They whisper to me, from the walls." Sarah's smile faltered. "Sweetheart, that's just your imagination." But later that night, when she passed by Emily's room, she heard it too, a low hum, like voices just beneath the plaster, weaving through the silence. She pressed her ear to the wall. It was faint, but real. Words she couldn't quite make out. Meanwhile, Ben had made a new discovery of his own. He was exploring the upstairs hallway when he found a narrow closet door he hadn't noticed before. Inside was a small wooden chair, and, sitting perfectly upright, a porcelain doll with cracked cheeks and glass eyes clouded with dust. "Cool," he whispered, lifting it up. Its head tilted slightly, as though following his movement. That night, he placed the doll on his dresser. But in the morning, it was sitting on the windowsill, staring out into the yard. He asked Emily if she moved it. She shook her head. When he asked Mom, Sarah said gently, "Old houses have drafts. Maybe it fell and you set it back differently." Ben didn't argue, but later, when he returned from brushing his teeth, the doll was on his bed, facing the door, and its mouth was open. One evening, Sarah sat at her laptop, scrolling through old archives of the property online. She'd been trying to convince herself that the strange noises and movements were just stress or the house settling, but she couldn't shake the need to know. Then, she found it. An old newspaper scan from the Salem Herald dated 1890. Tragedy at the Hawthorne estate. Eleanor Hawthorne, wife and mother, took the lives of her husband and 2 children before ending her own. Neighbors claimed she believed the house was whispering warnings to her, voices of betrayal and grief. Her final words, written on the wall in her own blood, "The walls remember everything." Sarah's stomach dropped. She closed the laptop quickly, heart pounding. But curiosity gnawed at her. She reopened it, and the screen flickered again. For a split second, she saw a reflection of her own face, but with another woman's eyes staring back. Later that night, she told Mike what she'd found. He chuckled. "Honey, you're letting the internet mess with you. These ghost stories are made up to sell old houses. You really think paint and plaster can remember things?" Sarah frowned. "It's not just that. Emily's drawings, Ben's doll." "They're kids," Mike interrupted. "They're adapting. You're stressed. You've been through a lot." She wanted to argue, but she couldn't. He was right. She had been through a lot. Maybe she was imagining things. But when she turned to look at him, for the briefest second, his face seemed to flicker. Not glitch, not shadow, but change. Like someone else's reflection overlapping his. Someone older. Someone angry. She blinked, and it was gone. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the house shifted again. The whispers grew bolder, louder. Sometimes they came from the floorboards. Other times, from the vents. At night, the family could hear faint weeping beneath the walls, like someone trapped behind them. Emily stopped going outside. She drew constantly now. Dozens of sketches littered her desk. A woman in a long dress, her hands pressed against walls, her mouth open in a silent scream. Ben cried in his sleep. When Sarah asked what he was dreaming about, he whispered, "She says I'm her son now." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Who says that?" "The lady in the walls." Tension began to tear at the family. Mike worked longer hours in the basement, snapping at anyone who disturbed him. Sarah felt a heaviness in her chest that made it hard to breathe. Emily barely spoke. One night, during dinner, the lights flickered. The air turned icy. Ben dropped his fork and whispered, "She's here." "Stop it," Mike snapped. "Enough of this ghost talk." But then, bang, the kitchen cabinet slammed open by itself. Dishes shattered across the floor. Everyone froze. "Old house," Mike muttered, his voice trembling. Air pressure. But Sarah was staring at the wall above the sink. Fresh scratches were forming there, right before her eyes, words being carved into the plaster. "Leave." Her breath hitched. Mike grabbed her hand. "We're leaving tonight." But then from upstairs came Ben's scream. They rushed up the stairs. The hallway light flickered violently as they reached his room, empty. The doll lay on the floor, its porcelain face cracked, one glass eye missing. "Ben!" Sarah shouted, frantic. A faint voice came from below, from the basement. Sarah ran down the creaking stairs. The air was thick, cold, suffocating. She found him standing in the corner facing the wall. His small hand dragged slowly down the bricks, leaving a trail of blood from shallow scratches on his wrist. "Ben?" she whispered. He turned his head slightly. His voice was flat. "She told me to play here. Mommy said it's okay." Sarah's heart broke. "I am your mommy." But Ben shook his head. "No, the other one." Then, silence. Mike arrived moments later, pulling Ben into his arms, whispering that everything would be fine. But Sarah knew better. Something had taken root here, something ancient, grieving, and vengeful. That night, unable to sleep, she returned to the attic. The old trunk was still there. Inside, beneath the photo of the Hawthorne family, she found a small, leather-bound journal. The pages were brittle, words faded. She flipped to the last entry. Only one line was legible. "The walls remember everything." The storm rolled in without warning. Dark clouds hung low over the town of Ashfield, and thunder rumbled like something ancient stirring beneath the earth. Inside the old Hawthorne house, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, staring at her untouched cup of coffee. The air felt thick that morning, heavy, charged. The walls seemed to hum faintly, like a pulse she could almost hear. Mike was in the basement, hunched over his desk. "I'll finish this project today," he said earlier. But lately, Sarah noticed his voice had changed. More impatient, sharper. Even his eyes looked different. Colder. Upstairs, Emily was sketching in her notebook again. Her once bright drawings of flowers and trees had turned dark. Twisted faces, screaming mouths, a woman in a black Victorian dress, the same figure Sarah saw in her dreams. Ben, meanwhile, sat in the hallway, whispering to the wall. Sarah watched him from the stairs. "Sweetie, who are you talking to?" He turned his head slowly, smiling. "Miss Eleanor," he said softly. "She says she misses her kids." Sarah's heart froze. "Who told you that name?" "She did." He pointed at the wall beside the staircase, where the old wallpaper bulged slightly, as if the plaster behind it was breathing. That night, the whispering began again. At first, it was soft, like wind brushing through cracks. But then the words came clearer, shaping themselves in the dark. You shouldn't be here. It remembers. She remembers. Sarah jolted awake, drenched in sweat. She turned to Mike's side of the bed, empty. Downstairs, she found him standing motionless in front of the living room wall. His hand was pressed against the wallpaper, his breathing slow, almost trance-like. Mike? He didn't move. When she stepped closer, she heard it, a faint whisper coming from the wall itself. He betrayed her. Mike's eyes flicked toward Sarah. Did you hear that? He whispered. Sarah nodded weakly. He laughed nervously. Okay, maybe this place really is haunted. But before she could answer, a deep thud echoed from upstairs, followed by Emily's scream. Sarah and Mike raced up the stairs. Emily's door slammed shut before they could reach it. From inside came muffled crying. Emily! Open the door! Sarah shouted, banging on the wood. When the door finally creaked open, Emily sat trembling on the floor. Her sketchbook was torn to shreds, papers scattered around her. Every drawing now showed the same thing. A woman hanging from the ceiling, her eyes hollow, her hands reaching toward the walls. I didn't draw these, Emily whispered. I swear I didn't. Sarah hugged her tightly, but something in the girl's voice chilled her. She wasn't crying. She sounded empty. Behind them, Ben appeared at the end of the hall, clutching his doll. Miss Eleanor says Emily's not supposed to draw her, he said softly. It makes her angry. The next morning, Sarah drove into town to meet a woman she'd found online, Mara Cole, a local psychic and historian. The woman's small office smelled of sage and old books. You said the house is whispering? Mara asked, flipping through her notes. The Hawthorne residence? Sarah nodded. We found old pictures. The family. Eleanor Hawthorne, Mara interrupted quietly. She was accused of murdering her husband and children in 1890. They said she went mad. But the psychic's eyes darkened. I don't think she was insane. I think she was trapped. Trapped? Mara leaned closer. Eleanor's husband was a cruel man. She tried to protect her children. The curse she left behind wasn't born from hate. It was born from grief. The walls took her in. They're how she lives now. Sarah felt a chill crawl up her arms. How do we stop it? Sometimes, Mara said softly, you don't stop it. You make it remember what peace feels like. That night, Sarah returned home to chaos. Lights flickered violently. The air was freezing. Emily sat at the dining table, eyes glassy, whispering to her torn sketches. Mike paced back and forth, muttering that someone was watching him. And Ben was gone. Ben? Sarah screamed, running through the house. The power surged. The lights dimmed, then died completely. A faint giggle echoed from the basement. She grabbed a flashlight and descended the stairs. The beam trembled as she moved. Ben was sitting in the corner, his doll cradled in his lap. The walls around him were covered in scratches, words carved into the plaster. The walls remember everything. Sarah knelt down, heart racing. Ben, honey, what are you doing? He looked up, his eyes distant. She told me to play the game, he whispered. What game? The one where you never leave. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered. The wall behind him shifted, the plaster pulsing like a heartbeat. A woman's faint silhouette appeared within the cracks, whispering Sarah's name. Sarah, you understand, don't you? You've been hurt too. Sarah stumbled backward. No, you're not real. I just want my family back. The walls groaned and a gust of icy air rushed through the basement. Ben screamed, clutching his ears. Mike burst in, pulling them both upstairs. What the hell is happening? Sarah could barely speak. She's using the walls. She's feeding on us. That night, Mara arrived with a small leather satchel. We need to do this now, she said firmly, before the house decides you belong to it. She set candles around the living room, the air thick with incense and tension. Whatever happens, Mara said, don't listen to her voice. She'll say anything to make you doubt yourself. They began the ritual, chanting prayers, burning sage, placing salt along the baseboards. Almost immediately, the house responded. The walls began to shake violently. A deep moan echoed from within, followed by laughter, sharp, cold, female. Emily screamed as her chair slid backward on its own. Mike was thrown to the ground, his nose bleeding. Sarah held onto Ben tightly as he convulsed in her arms. His voice deepened, unnatural. She doesn't want to leave, Ben said in a distorted tone. You promised, Mama. You said we'd stay forever." "Ben," Sarah sobbed, "fight it, baby." But the child's eyes rolled white. He stood up slowly, picking up the kitchen knife from the counter. Emily froze in terror. "Mom?" Ben turned toward her. His lips curled into a smile that wasn't his. "Eleanor says only one family can live here." The lights exploded. Sarah lunged forward, tackling Ben before the blade struck. Mara shouted incantations as the room erupted in chaos, walls cracking, whispers turning into screams. The wallpaper tore away, revealing black, pulsating wood beneath, as if the house itself was alive. Then, silence. Ben collapsed in Sarah's arms, unconscious. The knife clattered to the floor. The whispers faded, but only for a moment. Because as Mara caught her breath, she looked up at the ceiling and whispered, horrified, "It's not over. She's awake now." And from somewhere deep within the walls came a single trembling whisper, clear and unmistakable. "You can't burn what already breathes." The night the storm returned, the Hawthorne house came alive. Thunder rolled through the hills. Rain lashed against the cracked windows, and the air inside the house was thick, like breathing through silk soaked in grief. The family huddled in the living room, candles flickering around them, the psychic Mara Cole standing in the center of a salt circle, clutching her worn leather satchel. The walls whispered constantly now. They didn't even try to hide it anymore. "You can't leave. It's already begun." Sarah held Ben close, feeling the tremors running through his small body. His skin was cold, his eyes distant, and every now and then he'd murmur in a voice that wasn't his own. "She's waiting, Mommy. She says you promised to stay." Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. "Please, not my boy." Mike's jaw was clenched tight. His rational mind had crumbled days ago. He no longer tried to explain what was happening. He could hear the voices too. He could feel them moving through the walls like insects beneath his skin. Mara's voice broke through the sound of the storm. "Everyone stay inside the circle. Whatever happens, do not step out. The house feeds on fear. Don't give it what it wants." She began chanting, her voice low and rhythmic. The candles flickered violently. From deep within the walls came a long, trembling wail. Suddenly, the wallpaper split open. A fissure ran up the length of the wall like a bleeding wound. From within, a pale light pulsed, soft at first, then blinding. The air smelled of iron and rot. Emily gasped. "Mom, look!" Inside the crack, something was moving. Mara stepped forward, holding a small brass bowl filled with burning sage. "Show yourself, Eleanor Hawthorne." The whisper that replied wasn't angry. It was sad. "I never left." The light dimmed, and the outline of a woman emerged within the wall, her eyes hollow, her hair hanging like wet ropes. She was weeping. "He hurt me. He hurt them. I kept them safe. I kept them inside." Sarah's breath hitched. "You don't have to keep us here, Eleanor. You can let go." The spirit's face twisted in agony. "No, they'll hurt you too. They always do. I'll protect you like I protected them." The house shook violently. The floorboards buckled beneath their feet. Mike grabbed Sarah's arm. "She's not protecting anyone. She's killing us." Mara threw a handful of salt into the crack. The apparition screamed, its voice shaking the walls. "Burn the journal," she yelled. "It's the anchor that keeps her here." Sarah fumbled through her bag and pulled out the brittle leather journal she'd found weeks ago. The moment she opened it, the pages fluttered wildly, ink bleeding, forming words she hadn't written. "You'll betray them too, like he did." The air turned freezing cold. Sarah's breath came out as fog. Her hands shook as she held the journal over the fire. Eleanor's voice grew desperate. "Don't, please. It's all I have left of them." But as the flames touched the paper, the entire house screamed. The walls rippled like living flesh. Cracks spread across the ceiling, dust falling like ash. Emily covered her ears, crying. Ben's body convulsed in Sarah's arms, his eyes rolling back white. Then he spoke, but it wasn't his voice. "He made me watch. He locked us in the wall." Everyone froze. Through Ben, Eleanor's memories spilled out. They saw it. Brief flashes in the candlelight like film burned onto the air. A man dragging his wife by the hair, children crying, nails hammering into wood, the sound of a wall sealing shut. Mara whispered in horror. "He didn't kill her. He buried her alive with her children." Sarah dropped the journal, trembling. "Eleanor, you were the victim." "I tried to keep them safe," the voice sobbed through Ben. "But the walls, they took me too." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Sarah did something no one expected. She stepped out of the salt circle. Sarah, no, Mara screamed. But Sarah walked to the trembling wall, her face streaked with tears. You don't have to keep hurting people to be remembered, she said softly. You can rest now. Eleanor's face flickered in the wall, confused, anguished. He'll come back. No, Sarah whispered. He's gone. You're free. She pressed her palm to the wall. The surface pulsed once, then went still. And then, as if the house exhaled after holding its breath for a century, the light faded. The whispers stopped. The storm outside began to quiet. But peace never comes easily in places like this. As they all stood in stunned silence, Mike suddenly stiffened. His eyes glazed over. Mike? Sarah called. He turned to her slowly, and in that moment, his face changed. It wasn't Mike's eyes looking back at her. It was his, the husband from 1890, the abuser. You shouldn't have freed her, the voice growled. Mike lunged. Sarah screamed as he pinned her against the wall, his hands wrapped around her throat, squeezing hard. Mom, Emily shouted, rushing forward. Mara grabbed the girl and yelling incantations as the floorboards splintered beneath them. Ben's doll rolled across the floor, landing beside the crack in the wall, now glowing faintly red again. Emily broke free from Mara and snatched her sketchbook. She flipped to the page where she had once drawn Eleanor's face. Sad, broken, lost. With shaking hands, she tore the page free and pressed it against the wall. Look, Eleanor, this is you, she cried. You're not the monster, you're just scared. The wall pulsed violently, the house shaking to its foundation. Mike's grip on Sarah loosened. The ghostly outline of Eleanor appeared again, her expression softening as she looked at Emily. I remember. With one final ear-piercing shriek, the spirit burst into light. The wall cracked open, revealing something hidden inside, a decayed wooden beam and the tiny skeletons of two children. Sarah collapsed to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Mike fell beside her, dazed and shaking. Mara whispered a final blessing, her voice trembling. May they finally rest. By morning, the storm had passed. The house stood silent for the first time in decades. The family packed what little they could carry. As they loaded the car, Sarah looked back one last time. The rising sun glinted off the shattered windows, making the house look almost peaceful. Emily climbed into the car, glancing back too. Do you think she's really gone? Sarah hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. I hope so. But just as she shut the car door, she heard it, faint, almost gentle, carried on the morning breeze. Thank you. But the walls never forget. Her heart stopped. Emily turned to her brother. Ben was smiling faintly in the back seat, cradling the same old porcelain doll. Its eyes were open now. Some houses are never haunted. They're just remembering. If you ever move into a home where the walls whisper, maybe, just maybe, they're telling you someone never got to say goodbye.